Hey everyone, so today is story time. I'm going to be telling you a story about Wi-Fi. So my father was always on top of the latest technology. When dial-up first came about, he was on top of that. When Wi-Fi first came about, he was on top of that. And he was always the one buying these things, installing them, trying them out, doing it himself. And it was just incredible. And if you guys don't know what dial-up is, basically this was like the first initiation of the internet. This was the first actual network of the internet. And how it worked was, in order to get onto the internet, what you had to do was connect to the cord or phone service in your home, and there's a little plug in the wall where your phone network goes. So you plug one cord into the phone network in the wall and one cord into your computer. I feel like I just butchered the explanation. Basically, you use your phone to connect to the internet through the phone network, and you basically had to dial in, and it would take about maybe 2 to 3 or 4 or 5 minutes sometimes. And in fact, anyhow, it was very, very exciting, this whole thing, and it's just incredible because you would do this whole thing, and as soon as it would appear and work, you get this voice that would say in a very deep voice, "You got mail." And it was just very exciting because it's like, ooh, who mailed me on the internet? Ooh, check out this website. Wow, this is really cool. What if I go here? Wow, it loads fairly quickly. And by fairly quickly, it would mean 2 to 3 seconds, which was still pretty darn decent back in the day. Honestly, it's still faster than some of the connections I get nowadays with the internet and technology we have now. Anyhow, this story is going to be on Wi-Fi. So basically, my dad was on top of it, and he installed Wi-Fi into our home. So this was all brand new, and it was different. This was back in the Windows XP days, which was, I still think, one of the best versions of Windows that ever came about. Anyhow, so we have a upper floor to our house, and he did this whole thing, installed this whole thing, and he bought this little Wi-Fi thing where it was a little antenna that you can plug into a computer, and then you can hold this little Wi-Fi thing or put it on a shelf somewhere, and it would send out beams or whatever have you, and that would hit the network and modem downstairs, and that would be supposedly how Wi-Fi worked. But this was in the early days, so it was very exciting. It's just like, wow, we don't need a wire to do this anymore. I mean, will it be as fast? Well, I mean, it's probably pretty slow because it's wireless, right? And so basically, it was kind of slow, but it was still very incredible that it worked. And there's some days where it's just like, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm going on the internet, I'm checking out all these different websites, I'm playing these flash games, I'm playing RuneScape, this massive multiplayer online video game that I loved back in the day, and I would play that non-stop all the time. It's kind of like World of Warcraft, but like a free-to-play version for people who couldn't afford World of Warcraft. And it was incredible. I remember when I was playing these games, especially the intensive ones, which required a constant connection, like RuneScape, where the Wi-Fi would oftentimes go out because it was a bad connection, it wasn't strong enough, the signal, all these sorts of things, and it was frustrating. You were intensely in the middle of a battle online, and it would just cut out and log you out, which would screw you over because if you're in the middle of the combat, you're not supposed to be allowed to log out unless you lose connection, which you're forced to, but you're still in the game, which means if you don't have control of your character, you can die to that monster, and if you die, you lose all your prized possessions, which cost you a long time to grind and earn the money to buy, and that kind of sucks. I know, very nerdy gamey stuff. Anyhow, what I remember about that time was that I was very frustrated oftentimes. I would have to be on best behavior and do all this stuff, and finally ask in the most politest way on the weekends if I could have a little bit of free time, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours if I'm lucky, to go on the internet. And I remember oftentimes I got to a point where I was so excited and enthusiastic about it that I would come home from church on Sundays and I would just be like, please, and I would switch it up sometimes. Sometimes I would go in and ask in Spanish, and apparently there is this little, playbook that was bought, and I learned how to say it in Spanish, and I basically said that to maybe impress him. I don't know what I was thinking. Can I go on the computadora in Spanish? I forgot how to say it. And sometimes, oftentimes, sometimes he wouldn't, but sometimes he would allow me to go on the internet and play. And obviously it was restricted because they wanted me to perform well in academics. And I remember getting very frustrated at times because the internet would die oftentimes, and I would finally be allowed to play, and I would still not have connection, or it would die out. And I'd be so frustrated because sometimes it would die out for half an hour or so forth, and there's all sorts of troubleshooting you had to do because this was back in the day where it was very clunky and so forth. So you had to do all this stuff to try and get the network connection to work, and I would hold the signal, the antenna, in all sorts of different directions, and behind my head, all up, as high as I could, in all sorts of different directions to maybe get the Wi-Fi to work, and it was horrendous and horrible. So yeah, that's basically my whole gamer story. Obviously it's different for a lot of people. Even today, I realize how unique of a niche that kind of is. Although there's probably millions of people who have similar stories, at the same time I realize that for the general public, most people, a lot of girls and so forth, they're not necessarily doing this stuff. Like when they were in high school or middle school, a lot of them, like, their whole focus is, oh, I play lacrosse, or oh, I like to shop and hang out with friends and go to the beach, and maybe watch some Netflix or movies or TV shows. So it's kind of interesting seeing the dynamic and variety of people. And yeah, that was basically my world, and I'm sure it's a lot of people's worlds. Yeah, those days were very interesting, and it's just incredible, and I feel very fortunate for how fast technology has advanced and is advancing, because now, generally speaking, we don't have to deal with those things, although there are a bunch of other problems that can occur on the computer now that we have to debug. But it's very fortunate that we don't have to deal with that crap anymore. I remember I would get so frustrated, and sometimes I would regrettably, sneak time onto the computer to use it, and it would just suck so much when, I was finally allowed and given permission to go on, and guess what? The connection wouldn't work, or it would die, and you couldn't get it to work after an hour's worth of troubleshooting. I remember being so frustrated and angry and so mad. And it would get worse and worse. I would do all sorts of troubleshooting to try and get the Wi-Fi to work, and it would still not work, and I'd just be so pissed off and on tilt, and I would try more and more because I just wanted to get on more and more, and it was just like this whole mess. And that time seemed like an eternity, because it kind of was. It felt like it would always be like this, and it'd just be this endless cycle. And those were the days when all I cared about were games, and when would I have the free time to play those games. And school was a thing too, but my biggest passion and biggest interest was RuneScape and those types of video games. So that's basically my story. It's hopefully you found it entertaining. As always, hit the like and subscribe button, and hopefully I'll see you in my next video. Thanks for watching.